While this meeting is so while this meeting is being broadcast, public comment may only be provided by the city. So, city.
Councilmember Barbadillo. Vice Mayor Chua. Councilmember Leanne. Here. Councilmember Fan. Mayor Montano.
I'm here. Okay, thank you. And pledge of allegiance, I'll stand up. Ready? I pledge allegiance. Any item. Please note that public forum will be limited to 3 minutes. Mr. Speakers.
I have a speaker card for Gina Nadler.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for hearing me. I'm calling to ask that when you are discussing the budget, that funding be allocated, that we can have another amazing menorah lighting. This year, my son and our family sponsored the first ever Milpitas Hanukkah menorah lighting. We had over 50 people come, and it was really wonderful. So we would really love for that to be in the budget. Ideally, if possible, we would like $1,000 so we could purchase a menorah. We had borrowed it before, so we can have activities for children, and so we can also have some food items and some demonstrations of Hanukkah games and for some and Hanukkah traditions. And that would be really wonderful. Our family is willing to run it again, and we've had a lot of interest from the people that came that would also like to be involved in running it. And we are very happy to spearhead this and to run it again. And that's everything. We hope you'll consider it. And we hope that everybody could come. Thank you very much for everybody here that did attend, Mayor Montano and Representative Leanne. Thank you so much for coming to the first one.
Thank you. It was a great event. Okay, anyone else? No additional speakers.
I have no additional speakers.
Hi, everyone. I'm here to basically.
What's your name?
Oh, my name is Arjan Kalbali, 225 Spence. It is. The reason I'm here, I would like to understand, as we all know and we have heard, there is a conflict going on in the world, and there are people being killed as a result of that. And I think I believe every one of us are responsible because we have direct influence of the current killing, and some people call it genocide. I'm talking about the conflict between Israel and Palestinians. So the fact that we have direct impact of what's going on over there. When I say we, I'm talking about we as a citizen of this country, because of our tax money dollars that we contribute. Over $3 billion a year it's been spent and given for military support in that area. So I'm trying to understand, do we care about that? Do we feel responsible? Just want to remind all of us, not too long ago, we had the Gulf War, or actually it was after that Iraq War. I don't know how many of you remember that. We end up going over there and killing over 500,000 people, if not a million, destroying a country. I would like to understand, do we care as a citizen of this country? What is our role? Are we gonna sit quiet? Even if that's the case, I like to, our official, our city government announce, say, we know what's going on. We choose not to say anything. We choose to be quiet and let this killing continue, just like we did in the past. And if we think that, something else, we need to respond and react to it. There are many cities are taking position. They are reacting to this. I am personally very sick and tired of this. I like to see that we put pressure on our federal government, specifically man who's in the White House, and now they call him Genocide Joe. They don't call him President Biden.
Thank you.
So again, thanks for listening.
So now we'll read the code of conduct. Actually announced it's a conflict of interest.
Thank you, Mayor. I ask you, Mayor, and each of the city council members, whether he or she has any financial or personal conflict of interest related to any of the items on tonight's agenda.
Councilmember Barbadillo,
None?
Vice Mayor Chua,
None.
Councilmember Leanne,
None.
Councilmember Fan,
None.
Mayor Montano.
None.
Please let the record reflect there are no reported conflicts.
Thank you. So now I will read the code of conduct. Milpitas City Code of Conduct, be respectful and courteous, words, tone, and body language do matter, model civility, avoid surprises, praise publicly and criticize privately, focus on the issue, not the person, refrain from using electronic devices while on the council dais, disclose conflict of interest and affiliation related to agenda items, separate governing from campaigning, council speaks with one voice after making policy on issues, respect the line between policy and administration, council will hold another accountable with this. Thank you. And now, now I will go on to the approval of the agenda. So is anyone want to make any changes to the agenda? Vice Mayor?
Seeing none, so moved.
Second.
So it's moved by Councilmember, Vice Mayor Chua and seconded by Councilmember Barbara. Okay.
Councilmember Barbadillo,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Chua,
Aye.
Councilmember Leanne,
Aye.
Councilmember Fan,
Aye.
Mayor Montano.
Thank you very much. And so now we will receive the one.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Montano, Ned Thomas, City Manager, and welcome Vice Mayor Chua and members of the council. We have all members of the executive team here tonight, 2 members of staff, and also want to welcome the members of the community as well. We're pleased to join you tonight for this kickoff meeting for the preparation of our fiscal year 24-25 budget, operating budget for the city. And I just want to begin by saying, as a city manager, I feel it's of utmost importance that we provide full transparency and accountability throughout the budget process, and that we clearly explain how the budget process works, how we're using the public funds to meet the diverse needs of our community and its residents. So that will that's part of our focus tonight. The presentation tonight will begin with a brief overview of key projects, programs, and initiatives that are currently underway or have already been completed since the start of the current fiscal year back in July 2023. So just 7 months ago. And I think you'll be impressed as I was. I gathered input from all of the department directors on the key projects that they've been working on. It's certainly not a comprehensive list. I think we'd be here all night if I gave you everything, but I did want to highlight something from each of the departments. And again, this is part of that transparency that I talked about. I want you to know that, just the current budget that we have, I think is always a good place to look at where we are now and the current budget that we have and what we're working on, and making that connection between the budget process and the programs and the people, and how all of that is important in delivering the benefits and the services to our community and the residents and the businesses. So we will focus on that. After I provide a few highlights, we want to move things along quickly. I'll have the finance director, Lauren Lai, review the current priority areas that the council has identified. And then she has a few slides on the community survey. You received a very detailed presentation last week, so we won't show all of them, but a few that we thought were related to the budget process. And then, of course, the basis for the foundation for our discussion tonight is really the 10-year general fund financial forecast. And I think you'll find that quite interesting. City Manager Matt Kano will then discuss funding needs related to a few of the new projects that have been identified by the council through the prioritization process over the past year. And planning work in the Innovation District and along Main Street. And then to wrap it up, economic development, of course, you're aware, just recently, we've launched the Micro Enterprise Assistance Program for 25 businesses, also launched an ARPA-funded workforce development grant program to the school districts, and you can see some of the where that money is going to, and also launching and establishing the workforce housing rental assistance program. And then last but not least, of course, in December of last year, the council approved the merger of the Public Works Department, the Engineering Department, to streamline and provide greater opportunities for greater efficiency and collaboration among the departments. So again, just a few high-level accomplishments to let you know that what we're doing during the day. And again, I want to emphasize, I wanted to start there because I think it's important for us to report to the community the way that we're using these budgeted funds. And when we talk about the budget, we should always make that connection that these programs are really, and we talk about whether it's funding for people or for programs, that it's all about delivering high quality services, municipal services and programs to our residents. So I'll leave it with that, and then I'll turn it over to Lauren for what we're really here tonight to talk about is the fiscal outlook, long-range fiscal outlook for the city. Lauren.
Good evening, council, mayor, and members of the public. Lauren Line, finance director for members of the public. First, I always want to give gratitude to the council and the executive team for their participation in the development of the budget where we are, and then staff, particularly two staff members here, the assistant finance director and budget manager, who have helped tremendously. Just so everyone in the room kind of understands what tonight's main purpose is and how it is congruent in our budget development. We often kick off our budget with some big picture discussion about the economy, where we are, where we think our base budget is, and what we foresee in the next 10 years based on this service level. And when we mean base budget, we mean our financials relative to the current service level. So budget lingo, that means current service level. And during the budget development, we may propose service enhancements should there be funding long-term to fund those. The main takeaway, I think, this evening is similar to last year. We are optimistic about the future. However, as good governors, we are conservative and tempered in that optimism. And we'll go through some major economic factors as to kind of why we come to that tempered position. And we'll walk you through some of that, okay? So tonight what we'll do is we'll cover the budget calendar. The reason why the budget calendar is important is it enables the public to participate and understand how we come to decide how city resources are allocated. We'll then move into the priority budget, priority areas, talk about the surveys, just a few highlights, and then look at the economic outlook and some major broad factors that we monitor on an ongoing basis. We'll look at the 10-year forecast in numeric sense and in an illustrative chart sense. Consistent with prior years, we'll go through a couple of areas of revenue and expenses, top line discussions, and then also talk about our reserves, because reserves are really integral to our financial sustainability and good long-term practices for ensuring we can provide these services to the community. Then we'll turn it over to the Andrew to talk about and prioritization of referrals. I'll certainly engage, ask questions as we go along. Okay. Is my volume okay? Am I speaking into this?
Speak a little louder.
Okay, I'll speak louder. Glad I checked. All right, so consistent with prior years, this is what our budget development calendar looks like. You have tonight, and then we have our CIP budget. So in the city, we have an operating budget and a capital budget. So the capital budget will come to council in February. And then in March, we'll have a scheduled strategic planning workshop with council. We have a couple of other opportunities for the community to participate in an informal basis, which is what we call the open town hall budget survey, which is online. We've done it in the last couple of years, and we want to continue that endeavor. That is in addition to the statistical survey, which was already completed in November and December. We have also a community engagement meeting as well, where it's an open town hall for the city manager to brief and then entertain any questions for members of the public who wish to engage and ask us some questions in an informal setting. In April, May, and June, This is when we go to council with the proposed capital plan, the user and regulatory fees, the operating budget, and after deliberation and direction from council, we will finalize those budget for council's public hearing and after. Okay, the volume better. Good. So now we'll go into the communities, the council's priority areas and community survey. These are the 7 council priority areas in alphabetical order: community wellness and open space, economic development and job growth, the environment, governance and administration, neighborhood and housing, public safety, transportation, and transit. What does all that mean and why it matters? These priority areas are important principles and policies by which we collectively govern, look at policy direction, service levels, and especially funding allocations. And so we bring them up every single budget cycle and often during periodic reports back to council.
So I have a question on that. So I know that these are our 5 priorities, but after speaking to several mayors in the county, what they do is they have a goal setting. So that way they can get the feedback from the council of what is, what would they like to see, what are important, even though these are, it's like the big umbrella, right? But to be specific. And so I had asked city manager if we could have a goal setting meeting because I feel it's important. I mean, they do it, so why shouldn't we? So just I'm putting that out.
That will be
Thank
launched.
Yes, I did you want to comment on that?
Or you can discuss.
Yes, so if we go back to the calendar here, Mayor, in response to that question, you'll see on the calendar, March 15th, we have a strategic planning workshop during which there will be discussions as summarized by you for that purpose. As you may recall last week, the FM3 research firm summarized the council in that we conducted in November and December a statistically valid voter survey. This summarizes the breadth, the depth, and the different languages that we conducted it in. And so 16 members of our voting public were interviewed in various formats, and key information was ascertained. The key information we want to highlight tonight, and for those that are interested, this has been archived online, and it was a very informative and illuminating presentation last week. So the highlights we want to bring to your attention is that 4 out of 5 voters that were polled are satisfied with the overall quality of life here in the city. And that's really important because that's what our mission is, right? And the important aspect also is that this trend is very consistent over the annual survey. So that's very important, is that consistent satisfaction in the quality of life here. The other aspect, conversely, is as we look at resource allocation, what's important of top of mind to us is what is top of mind to our voters, right? So what this slide demonstrates here is the top tier concerns are homelessness and traffic. You'll see there's a dashed line that demarcates the top ones. So inflation and rising costs and cost of housings really are far and apart from some other concerns, followed by homelessness, traffic congestion, illegal dumping, jobs, and the general economy. Some of this, mind you, we have local control of, and some of it is more collective, regionally, state, and federal. But that's very relevant as we look at funding resources and priorities. We like to do this exercise in our polling. We say, if you have $100 of city money and you were to budget it amongst the different priority areas, where would you allocate those dollars? In prior 2 years, it's been very consistently balanced across all these areas. Top runner has been public safety. This year, public safety has made a far more impression on these individual surveys. So instead of floating around maybe $18 out of the 20, and you can see the balance there, it's $25 out of the 20. So that's kind of remarkable compared to the prior 2 years. It's still the #1 priority of those surveyed, but it's very distinguished this year apart from the others. And again, similar to prior years, the others are fairly balanced. Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. Can we go back, 2 slides, please? Oh, no, one forward, one, to the priorities from the survey. One more, please. There. So we're saying that 78% is very satisfied, but 54% or 23%, right? Is very satisfied. And then somewhat satisfied, 54, and somewhat dissatisfied is 16, and very dissatisfied is 6%, correct? Can we move forward? There. So you're saying that these are, I didn't see the other two. I thought is it inflation and rising costs and the cost of housing, are those the top priorities?
The concerns,
Pardon?
the concerns,
Your concern?
yes. So how this chart reads is dark orange is a very serious problem. EXT is extreme problem. The middle orange is a very serious problem.
But it does not answer the question of what their priorities are, correct?
Can you rephrase that just to make sure I understand?
What are their top priorities? Well, is it public safety? Cost homelessness? I didn't see that. This answers the question of concerns, not priority.
Correct. I see what you're saying. So polling is a science and an art. So from a science perspective, these polling scientists craft a variety of questions to try to kind of get to the sentiment of the voter and the perception. But one way of looking at it is, do you see these areas we're asking you about as a serious problem or not?
Did we ask those questions?
Yeah.
Did we?
Right here, these were
No,
the
I mean,
themes.
those, their priorities, did we ask those
I don't think
questions?
it was asked that way because keeping in mind the survey is only 20 minutes and it has to be delivered pretty consistently. So if you look at the next slide, it kind of gets to that theme, which is if you had $100 of city budget, how would you allocate it? Therefore, what are your priorities? And so you could see here, public safety is a high priority because it gets $25 out of the 100 when the others are less.
Got it.
It's not as precise, I think, as maybe
I
you're
understand.
saying.
We had a survey recently, based on the, the stormwater, based on favorableness of doing a what do you call that? Bond, what are those?
Obligation.
Yes. And the priorities that were stated there is, for some reason, public safety is not there, if I remember correctly. You know, it's totally different from Alex, do you remember those three? The three top, oh, I think Matt should know. Because I was surprised then, but I forgot to ask the questions because, you know, we know, I think, council members and the community, their top priorities, the residents' top priority is public safety. And I'm surprised that it was not even mentioned on the top 3 of the previous, very recent survey. And now we're looking at this survey, which is also fairly recent, and I don't see that question being answered. You know, we assume based on this divvying up the dollars that that's their priorities, but we did not directly ask the question.
Thank you for
Do you
the,
remember?
thank you for the question, Vice Mayor. And then I'll provide a more generic answer right now. Then I can actually, I'll look back at all the survey slides and maybe later in the meeting, I can provide a more specific answer. But briefly, they did ask a number of areas such as, you know, stormwater and streets and parks. And if you were able to, you know, if a bond measure included these items, would you be more or less likely to vote for it? And so there were some slides on that I can take a look at.
Yeah, it's there somewhere.
And also they definitely recognize that there's a need on the public safety area. Public safety, fire and police polled very well as far as being satisfied with the services. There was even a recognition by the public that the city needs additional dollars to provide these services, but there wasn't a connection that the public made regarding needing to provide the infrastructure and the buildings for the services. And so I will look back at the slides during this presentation and have a more specific answer later on.
Thank you, Laura.
No problem. Thank you for the question. So taking a step back and looking at our study tonight from a macro perspective, our goal in budget development is and always will be the priority of fiscal sustainability. And in order to achieve fiscal sustainability, we approach it from a very global perspective. We look at the economic outlook. We present a balanced budget. We look at best practices as it relates to fiscal policies and reserves to ensure that we can weather setbacks environmentally and financially or otherwise, and do that through long-term planning, such as tonight's study session. So now let's jump over to the economic outlook and broad factors. This very nice honeycomb illustration just highlights a few of the economic factors that we monitor: economic growth, monetary policies, labor market, financial conditions, consumer spending, and importantly also is geopolitical risk. A couple of the resources that we engage with and we rely on, the UCLA Anderson forecast says that as of December's forecast, they're very well regarded in this sense, nationally and at the state level. They say that the imminent threat of recession has faded, that growth in the US economy, however, will be tempered as interest rate is foreseeable to remain high, and that the inflation rates will recede slowly. And that's global at the national level, I should say. Some of the other things that we're looking at is federal reserves. The forecast right now is by the middle of this calendar year, the hope is that they'll ratchet down the interest rate. Why that's important is it influences all types of borrowing. Our number one revenue source to provide government services is property tax, and we'll go into that. So we are all watching that for major economic implications. Two other factors that are relevant to us is CPI, the Consumer Price Index in the San Francisco area, that has improved. So it has declined by 0.4% to 2.6%. So that's very good. That was floating at 6% plus in the San Francisco area, 8% plus nationally for a while. The other thing we monitor very closely because the labor market influences a general economy and certainly our local economy. Unfortunately, this metric is less favorable. So when we look at the Milpitas unemployment metrics, last year I was pleased to report that we were at 2.6%. I am less pleased to report that we are now at 4.6%. So that's not trending in the direction that we would like. However, similarly, last year when we looked at this from a macro perspective, the technology sector is a smaller percentage of our total employment base. It does have influence and it does make the headlines. But just wanted to give it some perspective because we do see a lot of headlines around technology layoffs. Going into the preliminary 10-year general fund financial forecast, now let's start jumping into the numbers. This is similar to what you see in the budget. It is the general fund portion only. It summarizes our forecast of revenue and expenses and our forecast of anticipated deficit or surplus. Do we have extra money or shortfall? And again, this is based on current service level methodologies, information, and assumptions that we know today. Similar to the forecast you have in the published budget, we foresee that we'll present to you a balanced budget. Next year, we'll have a very modest surplus based on today's assumptions. And then we start seeing deficits. Deficits are small, and then they get very large. You see there in the yellow arrow, the measure F, for some of you that are new to this discussion, measure F is the quarter-cent sales tax approved by the Milpitas voter that is scheduled to sunset and expire. That will expire March of 2029. You'll notice there our deficit is forecasted to begin before that, and it will continue to increase substantially. So the consideration of the extension of Measure F is going to be crucial to our financial sustainability.
I have a question on that. What do you think can offset some of those deficits? Any recommendations?
Yes, certainly the extension of Measure F is going to be very important. Measure F brings in $7 million or 5%. So it funds essential city services. The ability of us to pragmatically turn our financial position around and fill that gap is going to be an astronomical. That's number one. Two, similar to prior discussion, economic development, business engagement, creative governance and operations, and looking at creative way of providing services. And what we all do, which is very important, is discipline around fiscal policy and service level. While we all endeavor to provide extraordinary service level, fiscal sustainability is always a balance between service level and affordability.
Yeah, I think we all agree that attracting more businesses in our city would be one way to reduce that deficit.
And so on that final note about fiscal discipline, cost management, I would be remiss if I did not highlight that as a part of our long-term fiscal sustainability.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Lauren, thank you, Mayor. It's interesting to me that even though Measure F expires in March 31st, 2029, in 2026, 27, 28, we're already incurring a deficit.
Correct.
I don't need an answer, but we need to address that.
We do.
Okay. Thank
We're on
you.
the same page. All right.
Councilmember Bombadil?
Yes. So your 10-year financial forecast, what data did you use in this forecasting and concluding that the first 1, 2, 3 years we will not have a deficit, and remainder of the forecast we have those red numbers?
I have some slides leading up to that. Can I show you some pie charts first?
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
All right. I'll reserve that then.
All right, and then we'll go into that.
Okay.
All right, wonderful.
They're donut charts, all right.
They're donuts, but you know. So similar to the prior page, this is an illustrative line chart of the revenue versus expenses and the gap in those later years. Before we go into the methodology and assumptions, I always like to kind of highlight the portfolio of our revenue base. So then when we touch upon methodology, we're just going to touch upon the top 3 or 5 revenue sources. So what you see here is the general fund preliminary 24-25 budget. It's the revenue sources, and the bar chart here is in descending order. You'll note there that property tax is the #1 revenue source. Our general fund revenue is about 135 million. Property tax is almost 50 million of that, or 37%. And we'll talk about the metrics that we studied and the estimations that we use. Followed by sales tax. Sales tax, if we don't measure F, sales tax is about 30 million or 22%. If we add measure F, that's another 7 million or 5%. So sales tax as an economic source is 27%. Followed by TOT and charges for service. So it gives us a good cross section when we go into the methodology in a few more slides. So now we'll go into the top 3 revenue sources, methodology, assumptions, and the experts that we lean into to get informed information. Property tax, #1, general fund revenue source. It's administered by the county. Not all of our resources are administered locally. It's administered by the county, and we use the county as a resource. We meet with them quarterly. And we also have another resource, HGL. They are property tax experts. We meet with them quarterly, and they provide us real estate transactions and trends on the commercial and residential side. So what we're finding statistically from the county report and also from the HGL report is we have a lower number of real estate transactions. We're down about 25% from prior years volume of transactions. So the number of real estate changing hands. Also, the assessed valuation or the sales price of those transactions is also less than prior year averages.
Does that include commercial real estate?
No, that's only residential. Excellent question. On the other aspect, in addition to real economic trends, we have a law called AB8. Don't ask me to spell it out. That's how I know it. AB8 means the county assessor will reassess property when it goes down for the benefit of property owners. And so the county assessor is going through the tax roll and reassessing downwards property that have lost market value. So those 3 major components and factors negatively influence this revenue source. From an assumption perspective, we maintain that next year we'll have a 4% growth. And out years will have 3.75, and that's us working in conjunction with HDF. Keep in mind that Prop 13 guarantees about a 2% or CPI, so we'll get the 2% for the existing tax roll. Plus, we also still have a good volume of sales taking place and development of new. So again, we assume 4% for next year and 3.75% long term. Before I go into ERAF, I just want to pause there and see if there's any questions.
Questions.
Okay.
But I do see that the school district, it's still a big chunk.
Yes, yes. So hence this donut chart shows, because a lot of property tax owners don't understand that while they write that check and write it out to what appears to be the city, for every dollar of property tax paid, the city only gets 16.2 cents. Again, we only get 16 cents of every dollar, and the rest of that goes to the county and schools, which are very important, but they don't render police and fire and other things that we render here. So let's, yes.
One quick question. Okay, thank you. When you say community college, is that overall Santa Clara Community Colleges or the Evergreen Extension College?
I would have to look into that and get back.
Yes, because if it's only that one college, that's a lot.
I'll have to get back to you. It may depend on the tax rate area. So let me dig into that. So I'm going to take a sidestep on property tax. You may recall we've discussed excess ERAF before, and in later years, out of caution because it had been litigated, we as the city and the county, we prevailed twice. We set aside 30% because of the county recommendation. This year, the county is recommending 22% instead of 30. So we've set aside 22%, even though, you know, out of precaution. There's an emerging issue that came to our attention just 2 days ago. The state's budget proposal proposes taking some of this excess ERAF as a part of the state budgeting, balancing budget act. So we will be engaging with the council, the county legal counsel, to understand more as to what this proposed state legislation entails, how we can influence that outcome, and mathematically how that could affect our budget. So it's not the full property tax, it's not the full 4 million, it's some portion of it. And again, we just learned about this a couple of days ago, so we'll continue to monitor it and certainly keep council apprised and update our budget accordingly.
Yeah, so Councilmember Lynn and I attended the California League of Cities workshops in Monterey, and they did mention this, and also the clawbacks that are going to be happening for the governor to balance his budget. But that's going to be a big challenge, so I guess we have to be mindful.
Yes, yes, we're going to be mindful and exercise our legislative advocacy.
Thank you, Mayor.
Oh, sorry.
Lauren, when you say 14.8, do we expense it every time, or do we save it as a reserve? Just in case? What do you do with this?
I'm sorry, 14.8.
14 ERAF, the ERAF.
Oh, the ERAF?
Yeah, what do you do with the funds?
The set aside that we have? Oh, we kept them on the balance sheet. And the reason is because the county has advised all the cities within the county to set aside the 30% and keep it on the balance sheet to ensure that subsequent to the litigation, the appeals and everything, we put those aside. So they haven't been appropriated by council, they're designated on the balance sheet.
So it accumulates then.
It does.
How many years has it been?
We've accumulated 2 years.
This is how much?
Oh, we're gonna get to that slide. I believe it's about, I don't want to guess.
Okay,
I'll keep you in suspense.
Thank you.
I'll tell you in a few minutes.
thank you, Laura.
If I may. Yeah, thank you. I have a question regarding the methodology. I don't know if you have the answer, or if you can, ask FM3 to circle back, but it's regarding the assumptions of residential growth. Is that tailored to Milpitas data, or it is? Okay. Okay. Thank you. I'd love to see the cross tabs if I can, get a copy of that. feel free to send that over to the rest of my colleagues as well.
Let's see what's digestible, because that report is pretty voluminous, but yes, let me take a look at the report and see what maybe speak to the concerns of the council, and then we'll send some information out. Of
Wonderful, thank you.
course. Mayor, did you have another question, or should I proceed? Okay, wonderful. So without any further discussion on property tax, we'll move to the second source, which is sales tax. Sales tax is different in that it's administered by the state of California. The state of California, in addition to administering it, has strict rules on how much the tax can be and how much can be levied locally at this county and the city level. And we use HDL, who have the database throughout the whole state of California of all sales tax of all jurisdictions. So they are able to compile a lot of information for us and give us economic outlooks and trends by various sectors. And importantly, as the city manager mentioned at the top of the hour, they conduct audits on our behalf. And through their audit, we've been able to discover and capture $1 million of revenue that would have gone to other jurisdictions. So I'm very pleased about that collaboration. So from an economic perspective, what they've reported and what you see on the news and the headlines is consumer spending continues. It was happening during COVID, I think because of stress, shelter in place, that consumption has continued. We are monitoring it in that two other factors play into the consumer spending habit. One is what's happening with credit card balances when big data is being consumed and looked at. So consumer credit card balances are growing, meaning people are buying and they're not able to pay off their balances. They're just making minimum payments. So how long will consumer habits continue with that trend? Coupled with the big data about savings. Savings is diminishing. So how long will consumers continue to spend as savings and credit card balances are going in the opposite direction? Right. So what this budget assumes is a very modest assumption. We rely on about a 2% growth in the out years. And so we're very mindful of that. We work with HDL to make sure that it's not, an aggressive assumption. And every quarter we meet with them to look at actual data and to refine what's happening in the various sectors and our forecasts. Similar to the other donut chart, what's important to know is the Milpitas sales tax rate is 9.375%. Of that, as you could see, the city of Milpitas directly gets 1.25%. So that's a very small portion. Other portions go to the county, transportation, and so it's very important for people to understand. It's also very important as we look at Measure F. The power of Measure F is that 100% of it comes here. It's not shared, it's not distributed. The city of Milpitas people get to decide how to provide services with $7 million versus another governing body deciding whether or not it comes back to us. Okay, so of the 9.375, the city gets 1.25 directly.
Thank you. All right. I know that this is the DBF for percentage on gets what, right? Is there a way we can measure out of the, let's say, 1.56%, is there a way we can measure how much we get back out of that, what we put out?
Out of what number? 1.56? I'm not following.
Any one of these. I mean, any one of these. Like, wow, what? I guess I don't know. I mean, how do we measure like Silicon Valley Transportation Solution Tax? There is 50% or 0.50%. This is coming out of the sales tax out of Milpitas, right? Correct, this graph, this sales tax thing. How do we measure on, let's say they get X $million, how do we measure how much it came back to Milpitas as services? Is there a way we can measure that?
Excellent question. So how much indirectly comes back to the city through these other slices of the pie chart?
Exactly.
See, I have to read what you're saying, but I think I got it. So, Yes, excellent question. So some of these measures, monies indirectly come back to the city, such as the Measure B, transportation. Some of it comes back to us for roadways and projects. So we can work on that as staff. That amount will vary.
Find out like in Measure B, this is how much Milpitas got for the
Correct.
last 5 years.
Correct.
That would be something we can use, somehow in the future to negotiate stuff with the
Yep.
county.
Some of that is competitive, some of that is formulaic, and sometimes it's a hybrid of both. And so that's why, again, Measure F is beautiful because it's locally controlled. It's not formulaic, it's not competitive, it's just.
Yes.
Okay, so I think we can
Thank you.
do that. We can go back and study some of these revenue sources and see how much comes back to us indirectly as allocations. Okay, may I move on? So other revenue categories I think I want to call your attention to will be TOT charges, license permits and fines, and then we'll switch over to costs. So TOT, for those that care, it stands for transient occupancy tax. That's jargon for hotel tax or room tax. Our rate is 14%. It's locally approved by voters and locally controlled by the council. It is our number 3 revenue source, coming in at 10% of our general fund. Pre-pandemic, we had a revenue of 14.4 million. Some of you may recall, because of the shelter in place, it tanked down to 4 million. I'm glad to say that once the shelter in place was lifted, we resumed, people have traveled and people are lodging here because we have a nice portfolio of hotels. So those numbers are coming in at 11.2 million, current budget is at 11.8. We anticipate that next year it'll grow at about, I think, 10%. That's the recovery we're hoping. Okay. Keep in mind, in 23, we have 2 new operators. So we're hoping for an economic recovery to continue, plus the new operators, which create new hotels and new revenues.
Is there a sunset for the TOT?
No, great question. So when voters were asked to approve the TOT, both the original and the enhancement of 2%, neither of those have sunsets. So that's important. And it's paid typically by non-residents to provide for residential and shared services. Because visitors here use our streets, they use our parks, and public safety.
Do we measure what, similar to do we measure what some of those funds? Thank you. Do we measure what some of those funds are used for?
No, so general fund taxes such as TOT come into the general fund as a general resource, and council in the budget appropriation process appropriates it out. So it's not like a fund that goes into a special fund number that we track separately. And that's the intent. That's how voters approved it as well. You're welcome. So you may recall in Q1, I submitted to council the report for reasons we really don't know yet. TOT was down 11% from prior year. I was nervous. I shared that in the Q1 report. In Q2, meaning the quarter that ended December 31st, that has improved. We're down by 5%. So that gap, whatever it is improving, and go 49ers. I'm hoping that that's going to rally. It's hard to measure that type of influence, but you got to believe there's got to be some influence.
Oh, yeah.
So we're hopeful that with the established operators we have here and some of the big events across 237, we're going to see this continue to recover.
Yeah, we're only two miles away from the.
Correct.
So I think that the increase has to do with a lot of the.
And large concerts too. Okay, moving on to the other categories, charges for service, license permits, and fines. So charges for services is when someone comes in, uses a city service for really a personal choice and a direct benefit. Applications, recreation, that's kind of what we're talking about. Charges for service for us is primarily recreation programs, classes, courses, rentals, leases. You can see there that we discontinued the contract with the state and Milpitas for the ELOP program. And so that's reflected in the 24-25 budget. And that we stay on top of our user and regulatory fees. We bring this to council every year to continue to update and make sure that we have a sound cost recovery in providing our services. So we'll bring that back to council in April. We'll do much incremental changes, nothing really substantial, and consistent with council direction before. The recreation cost recovery policy, as you recall, that was like category A, B, and C. We're continuing to implement that direction from council. In license permits and fines, this is one,
Lauren, what's that ELAP is acronym for what?
I think I know, but I'm gonna defer to Renee.
That's a state program. It's extended learning opportunity program. So it's a 10-hour school day. So school districts are required to provide it.
Is that after the bill?
We maintain after the bell. That's our program, the city's program. And then the school district contracts out for either before school or additional after school opportunities for children who are at risk or low income.
So we have that program here.
We still have ATV and the district, and we're operating at most schools. And then the district also has an ELOP provider, and their curriculum is different than ours.
That's a revenue source according to this graph.
It's a revenue source and it's an expenditure.
So it balances out.
Yes, so we are balancing at mid-year. And then you'll see a reduction in both expenditure and revenue for 24-25.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll wait until you do your presentation. Okay. Thank you. Thank you both.
Councilmember Lin?
So on every single methodology, you have the amount. And when it comes to charges and service and license, you don't have the amount listed there. And Renee just indicated that it balanced out. But do we have the amount that comes in? So in other words, the revenue for that and the expenditure for that line item. Is that you, Lauren, or Renee?
So the charges for service that we estimate next year preliminarily is about $7 million. And that portfolio primarily includes recreation services, but we do have other charges as well in there. Public safety charges, some planning charges, fire charges. On the expense side, that's mostly the recreation program. The recreation operations, if you look in the budget, is broken up into functional areas, promotion, classes. Did you want to comment on that? And I think the different operations then kind of speaks to the cost for the recreation contract revenues.
Right, so thank you for the question. So the charges and services are not just my department. So I think that's probably why there isn't numbers on there. We typically bring in a little over 3 million. Last year we brought in 3.6 in revenue as a department. Specifically for ELOP, that program and any youth program or after school program for our cost recovery policy requires that within 3 years we get to 50% recovery of those fees. And so when we are reducing both the revenue and the expenditures for ELAP, we're taking the monies out that it costs us to run the program and the estimated revenue that went along with that. So we're no longer paying several part-timer staff to be out at this site, and then we're no longer collecting those monies. So it'll balance up. You'll see it at mid-year with actual numbers, and then you'll see in future budget workshops what our base looks like, and we can specifically call out that difference for council.
Please proceed.
License permits and fines, predominantly these are permits related to over-the-counter transactions for private individuals or development projects. So we're continuing to monitor this. As council may recall, we saw a significant dip in 23-24 and also in 22-23. And so being conservative in this budget that we present, we are continuing to maintain that. But in the out years, we're hoping for some recovery as we are, well situated here in the Silicon Valley. Expenditures. So I Well, let's cut over and talk about expenditures for a moment. Labor costs as a service organization, personnel costs represent 77% of the general fund. Major assumptions are based on labor contracts, so terms and conditions of existing contracts. Absent of those existing contracts, we estimate a cost of living adjustment. We also use actuaries to do actuarial studies of our pension for retirees, and then also a pension costs and also our retiree medical. So we incorporate those into our budget and our forecast. And we also estimate the medical costs, our employer costs for medical cost rising. So those are in the long-term assumptions. The assumptions are fairly consistent with prior year methodologies and trends. With the exception of pension, we have incorporated the new studies from our third-party actuaries. Contract services and supplies, they're based on current contracts to the extent we have contracts for some of this, such as Brightview. We would update them based on the contracts we have. Absent of those contracts, the budget analysts in the respective departments will estimate 3 or 4%. Some items will be more than that, depending on supply chain or just their forecast. But for the most part, it's contracts or 3%. Capital outlay, we use current methodology. This is basically vehicles and large equipment. Current methodology for replacement. Keeping in mind, public safety chiefs have approached me in prior years saying they would like to tweak those policies. Such enhancements would cost the city more, but it may be a priority area, especially as it relates to public safety vehicles. Such enhancements are not incorporated here because we want to present to you maybe what's feasible at this time. Last but not least, we have transfers out. What does that mean? Why do we transfer money out? Well, the general fund as a general source does support other services that do not have their own revenue source, namely the stormwater system. We do not have ratepayer. It's not an enterprise fund. And so by direction of the council and also consistent with prior year methodology, we transfer $500,000 in the budget, and it's also baked into the budget in the out years. As previously noted in prior studies with council, $500,000 is not enough. It's just a continued discipline, and we'll continue to engage the council and the public on what to do relative to stormwater. But this does continue to fund $500,000 for stormwater, and then we set aside $300,000 for technology. And this is citywide technology.
I have a question on contract and supplies. Can you disaggregate that? What the contract and supplies example? How much do we ask for consultants? That's a contract, right? So you give it that information of how much we spend for contracts versus how much we spend for supplies. I mean, I'd just be interested in just seeing what we pay for consultants.
Yeah, let
You
me.
don't have to give it to me now, but
Yeah, I think we want to aggregate it because if I was just going to give you one number, I'm afraid it doesn't pick up all the other numbers. So let us do that. There's a contract service account, but I think outside of contract services, we have other accounts that may be relevant, like promotions and things like that. That is not necessarily supplies. So let me log the question. So what I'm hearing is of the city's preliminary budget for contracts and supplies, you want us to pull out how much would be contract services? And would that be contract services for consultants or contract services in general, including such contracts such as Brightview and janitorial?
just consult.
Okay.
So someone else has. For me, just consult. And then also, if you can go back to the previous page, I added a question on license permits and fines. I'd like to see what others, if others, because I know our permits have gone down, so there's a deficit there. I'd like to see what other cities have their permits gone up. Licenses gone up. So I'd like to do a comparison to see, why ours are going to have gone down. So we can do that. Thank you. Vice Mayor.
Just to piggyback on your question, I think it would be nice to know the department's view on why they think the license permits and fines have gone down? You can answer, Bill, if you have it. Otherwise, it's okay.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Well, there's a few things happening here. For instance, when I got here about 5 years ago, we had quite a few large projects, 300 and 400 apartments and living units with, they call it Texas wrap style. You have a garage structure in the middle, surrounded by a big apartment building. I think we had like 6 of those going. So over time, of course, these have finished. And that land that was taken up with those new large developments, obviously was not available anymore. So going out to like the McCarthy Ranch area, what we're doing now is a lot of large TIs for demo of existing structures that are at the end of their useful life in certain projects like BD Life Sciences and Amazon. So those are coming online. And so there's going to be an uptick, but basically we're in a little bit of a downturn because of the finishing up of these large projects. And so we were left with the other, which is a lot of TI. And as you know, we don't do a lot of single family homes here. So the portfolio of projects, the mix changed pretty dramatically over the last 5 years, but it's coming back up in the center of larger projects. So you should see an uptick coming up.
Vice Mayor?
One more, Lauren, can you go and move forward? Yes. Did I hear you correctly that the labor cost is 70+% of the revenue?
It's 70% of our.
I mean, expense?
Correct, because we're a service organization, labor will always be the predominant.
71%?
77.
77. I think we need to look into this. That 77, I mean, that's the expense for the entire service level. I mean, we need to review this. I'm pretty sure you're gonna break this down somehow during the course of the budget process.
Oh, we turn every number.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just to let you know, labor always costs a lot. I mean, even when you have something done in your home, it's not the materials, it's the labor. So just. You may proceed. I haven't seen anyone else.
Wonderful. So let's shift gears and talk about long-term planning as it relates to reserves and reserve policies. This is an excerpt from the council's adopted budget. The policy is what we call a waterfall, meaning the first priority is the contingency reserve and the general fund budget stabilization reserves. These both represent about 2 months operating, and they are both funded at the council directed policy level, 16.67% for each. And then thereafter, we fund these others. These fundings come from the surplus each year from the general fund. They go through these to ensure that we're funding these priorities and these obligations. So pension, artificial turf, and then thereafter CIP, storm drain, affordable housing, transportation, technology. And you may remember last year, council authorized a new funding, SPAR, for real estate investment. So with that council direction, we were able to start that funding, and the balance sheet now has $700,000. We need millions more, but we have started funding that initiative and priority. Okay, so this next slide here is the reserve slide, and it'll answer the question about ERAF. So let's go through what you're looking at. This is a 6-year summary. It's from the audited financial statements. I always like to rely on the audit. And because it's from the audited financial statement, there's 4 categories of fund balance. There's 2 categories that I want to call your attention to. It's called the committed and the unassigned. So in the unassigned area, you'll see there the general fund budget contingency reserve, that's for like emergencies, and then the budget stabilization. You'll see there, each of those have 19.8 million. Down below, you'll also see, Vice Mayor, the ERAF litigation contingency, 2.3 million. So we started saving that 2 years ago, and then we saved again because we understand litigation is not final, and we'll continue to do that until we have confidence that those dollars can be locally appropriated. The other area that I have highlighted is called PERS stabilization. You may recall, council directed us to solve and mitigate the pension cost and volatility. And so we took that and put it into a pension trust called the 115 Pension Trust. That money is not shown here because by law it's segregated because it is a trust. And because of that, we have continued to set aside money and we've kept it on the balance sheet. The PERS stabilization, as you see there, is continuing to grow based on the council policy, and we are at $6.1 million. So it's very good in that we are following these policies and we are funding areas of significant obligations. And these tools will enable us to have some flexibility as we look at long-term financial sustainability and then also our service level as well.
So these are the unfunded mandates that first.
These are savings. So these are not the unfunded mandate. The unfunded liability is different. These are monies that council has directed us to set aside. So we have money in the section 115 trust, which is 34 million. Plus we have money here on the balance sheet, which is 6 million. Those dollars can be used by council for the purposes of pension costs. Those pension costs are borne within the general fund and also within the utility fund. You're welcome. Wonderful.
I'm Mayor and Council, Matt Kano, Assistant City Manager. And as we, oh, yes, go ahead.
Councilmember Papadio.
Well, my question was not answered. Oh, sorry. I thought we're going back to my question on methodology before we go to the council's prioritization.
Sure.
So the question is, that forecast that we put on board, what was the basis of the projected expenditures going forward?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Right. Now that I've learned that on our expenditure methodology, labor costs 77% of the total budget. So that 77% that you just disclosed, what was the basis of that? Is it the past 5 years or is it a projection of going forward with regards to anticipated labor costs? What was the data that was used to project that?
Right. So when we go to when we look at the base budget, preliminary budget right now for the general fund, it's 135.5 million.
Right.
That is comprised of mostly it's comprised of labor costs. So within labor costs, we run the information based on current employees. So we pull information from our financial system of current employees. And we calibrate that information based on our forecast of pension costs, because we work with the actuaries. Our medical costs, because we have the CalPERS medical premiums, and then a 6% assumption. Contracts that we have for labor groups, we use those, and adds it in the contract, we use a cost of living adjustment.
Can we go back to that the 10-year projection, please? That one.
Yes.
So are you indicating that look at the expenditures, it evens out with the revenues and other sources? So I understand this table right, 23, 24, just even out, and there is no deficit as we projected, right? So here's my question: with that 129.5 that magically evens out with 129.5 exactly on the revenue and sources, 77% of that are labor costs. True? Right. So
Probably a little less than in prior years, but for the purpose of this question,
for purpose of this question, that's 7, 9, that's 19 million at 21%. So that 19 million is based on current contracts, as you said?
current contracts plus authorized positions.
Right. So what that means is existing contract.
Yes.
If I get paid 100,000 as an employee, you're basing that projection on my current salary at 100,000.
On the 23-24 adopted budget.
Right.
Yep.
So my question is, why are we not projecting my increase to, my possible increase for the next 10 years?
We do,
All right,
to some degree.
right. So, okay, I'll take that, let's say, on that, table, right? So 129.5, then you projected for expenditures 135.5, and then there's an increment of 2-3 million in between. Right, so what's the basis of that? Have we incorporate possibilities of my increase in my salary projection over 10 years?
Yeah, so
Right.
if we don't want to get totally nerdy about this, because we can, I'll keep it at a high level discussion.
All right,
When I work with staff and we develop the budget, staffing costs is broken up into what I call as major cost drivers. The major cost drivers are going to be the portfolio of your headcount. You currently have 452. Council adds 2 more, that's 454. So that's a major driver. The other aspects are the components inside workforce, not only the headcount and the classification, but salary, medical costs, and pension costs. Those are the 3 components that I always monitor. Salary, we will use contracts to the extent we have them. And then we will use a cost of living adjustment as we talked before as a methodology. The model also assumes and calibrates if someone is not at top step, it'll continue to grow them to top step. So if we bring in someone and they're at step C, when we build this model, it'll bring them to step D and then E, and then they top out,
correct. I
right?
understand that.
Yeah.
Right,
So, as if you get promoted into another classification, the assumption is there that classification was approved and funded, right? And so that's an internal movement.
it is because that's the formula of an existing system, of an existing how do you go, workforce situation, right?
Correct.
Because it's a down contract. What I'm saying is, where do we incorporate the future? Not only on those things that you had mentioned, but let's say future contracts
Yes.
with labor.
So we have a placeholder for future contract, because oftentimes the contracts are a variety of enhancement. A lot of the enhancement is focused on the salary side, pension, medical, a little less so
Right.
here, especially as, you know, some of that has been weaned out of the contracts in 2020 as it exists now. So a lot of it has to do with the salary. So as we're in discussions and we finalize the contract, there's going to be refinement to the budget. As it relates to pension and medical costs, we work in concert with actuaries. They calibrate our pension unfunded liability every year as a part of our budget development. And we incorporate those unfunded liability obligations into the long-term forecast.
Right, maybe I can specify, so those actuaries that you use as, you know, basis for projecting forecasts. Would that entails, what percentage does the actuaries picks up going forward?
Percentage?
Right,
When
with
it-
COLA, with medical and everything that you had just mentioned, what's the, when you run these actuaries, what's the projection increase each year in terms of percentages
Of course,
after you project the 10-year?
they're each individual silos, so there's no expert that does all of it, that's us. And so on the salary side, in the published budget, our methodology is to use a placeholder of 3%.
Okay.
On the pension, we have experts that only work on pension, that's what they study for us. We use their actuarial reports. They give us a number that's called normal cost, which is the percentage of payroll, and then they will give us a number that is a gigantic number, which is the unfunded actuarial liability. And we put both of those numbers in the model. So one is a percentage of payroll and one is actual dollars.
Okay.
Medical, there's no forecast per se for medical. What we've been using is a 6% factor. That may or may not be adequate, just to be transparent with you. In 2022, 2023, that increased about 11%. During my tenure, it's also been a lot less than 6%. So we're using 6% in the long-term model
For medical
for medical,
and for salaries, it's 3%.
3%.
Here's the question, what happens if you overshoot that 3%?
We have to keep fussing with the budget until we bring to the council a balanced budget.
And then that projection would be wrong.
It'll be modified.
Okay, why not modify now and present us the specific scenario instead of basing it on an actuarial presentation, 3% for salary, 6% for medical and the other factors for the percentage? Wouldn't that be a more realistic projection of the 10-year financial forecast other than, because that's reality, right? We use 3%, 6% and other percent. But that would overshoot. That may overshoot, and like your example, you said, during your tenure, you keep it low, but at some point, medical is 30%. What happens if those percentages by those actuarial figures shoot up?
Yes, so like all long-term forecasts, we're going to have micro anomalies. And so the long-term forecast, like any long-term tool, is really a policy tool, right? So I'm not excited or exacerbated by these micro trends. I'm looking at the overall trend. And so 6% in my mind is fine as a methodology. Will we be at 4 or 8 or 10 or 12 or 2? Sometimes, yes. The overall trend line is fine. Does that make sense? So I'm not so much concerned about the micro implications, 1 year versus another when it comes to the purpose of long-term planning. It will, over time, might say maybe that 6% should be 6.5. Maybe it needs to be 5.5, right? I don't know that today. Okay, and so today we use 6%. The other reason why today we're using 3%, I don't want to predict and also presume what council may do as it relates to labor negotiation. And so because of that, we are presenting to council and the public what has been past practice in terms of our methodology. And as time goes on and council continues to provide direction, we will refine the budget accordingly.
Right. There's I don't know if it was not on the slide, it's on the gender report. This is the preliminary 10-year 2025, where there is a bright yellow pointer. I didn't see that. Bright yellow pointer regards to measure app.
Right there.
No, not that. Yeah, the full data. Yes. Is it projected or I didn't see that. But the full data, the one that's
Yeah, this table here is just rounded, whereas this table is whole numbers.
right.
So the attachment exhibit has whole numbers, but for the purposes of the slide, we just rounded the numbers.
Right, but with those whole numbers, instead that we have deficit on the second year. And this is on the third.
26, 27.
I see.
I know the font is so small. Would you like us to pass this down? Let's pass this down.
Well, if you say that that's a representation of the bigger numbers, then it seems to help me out. It doesn't much because this. There's a hard copy. Yeah. So look, for the year 20.
Can I just, this is the attachment to the agenda report that the council member is looking at right now.
So are we saying that that's a summary of what I need? But here there's already a red number starting fiscal year 2024. That's
23, 24. Oh, I understand what you're saying.
right.
So in 23, 24, we have a carryover, which is something council authorized. So that carries over from prior year fund balance that relates to 2 programs that council approved. So there's funding for that. It's just a little anomaly. But I'm not concerned about that because it is a balanced budget. We are taking funds from prior year and paying for that because that program couldn't be executed by June of last year. You're referring to the 200,000 in
Yeah.
23. Yep,
And then another 297 in the next 25, 26. That's also a little
is
anomaly.
it 25, 26, or is it 26, 27, that's 400,000?
It's, yeah, it's 20.
400,
It's
So it's the next column over on that list, and that's the amended budget.
yeah, it's the same, it just moves it forward, it's the same, it's 297,000 in the current year, because we have two small budget carryovers.
And then on the fiscal year 28, 29, when Measure F ends,
Yes.
the following year, it's almost triple.
Yeah, so the reason why is when Measure F begins, that year of implementation, we have 1 quarter of revenue. And the year it ends in sunset, we have 3 quarters.
Right.
And so in 27, 28, no, in 28, 29, we have about $6 million of Measure F.
Right.
The next year, we have 0.
Right. So now looking at that, although it's a few years ahead, what part of our revenue methodology would answer for this?
That's what Mayor asked earlier about an hour ago. It's gonna be, like all good governance, a portfolio strategy, revenue enhancement and cost management, economic development, creative solutions, regional solutions. So it's gonna be a portfolio of solutions.
Right, we don't have it just yet now. We don't have it yet.
I mean, we are actively working on all these programs. Based on today's information, I would be remiss to consider that we can implement all those to resolve those outliers.
Yeah, it's not about resolving those objects, it's just, we're projecting the budget and we're projecting revenue source. Right, you said in generality, it's going to be something that we look at, but this early, since it's imminent, 3 more years.
Right.
It's imminent, we should also be forecasting those things already. It looks like, the presentation for methodologies both in revenue and expenditure are standard. Standard as to, we just got lucky, we have Measure F. We did, right? Without that, there should, but now we are certain that it ends like fiscal year 27, 28. And what I hope is, as early as we could, we already have something to match it up. It's coming. Other than we say, okay, we'll figure that out, we'll work on that. But here's some projection. If we can project our financial forecast for 10 years, why can't we project revenue methodology for the next 10 years as well?
We can. It's just that in good governance, we would rather be moderate and conservative until we have tangible data that could illuminate such confidence. As government, we here have been successful. We have updated the general plan, which is a very important document, fundamental to development. We have the housing element, which is very fundamental to our housing and property, which is our #1 revenue source. This council has proven you are concerned about the business community and looking at engaging and working with our business community developers. And so we are working on major groundwork that builds that economic growth. However, as local government, we necessarily don't have control in that. So we have to be modest and conservative in our forecast. Until we have such confidence that we have projects in the pipeline, they're here, they're working with Bill and his staff. I don't feel confident in putting those projections in.
Right. Well, we have at least an idea. We have reason several areas in Milpitas, right? And some of those areas we lost property tax. We do because they gain property tax on a minimal percentage share because we converted them from either commercial industrial to a residential zone, and that in exchange, and hopefully this will be the projection study, that's in exchange of the second source of revenue are the sales tax. do we exchange the sales tax by converting, not exchange, no, it's so bad, I assume that. We exchange possible revenues in industrial and commercial zones, that 9.37%. Now we had converted them to a minimum, a different revenue source with the property tax, which we only have like 16 cents to a dollar. So those things, as we know, we already have them results. We know how much we're gonna generate from them as a property tax source, and it should be incorporated, right? Prior to its conversion for generating this, and now that it's for sure, we had changed the plan, and residential structures will be erected on these areas, then the revenue for that goes down to 16 cents to a dollar. So those things, if we can project based on an actually 3%, 6% or whatnot, why don't we incorporate? I'm not an expert in financial, but that's logical thinking. Why can we project a certain percentage of expenditures as well, and then incorporate that on our forecast?
We do it on a very granular basis. But I'm hearing maybe you want us to enhance our revenues.
Well, it's always wishful thinking to enhance revenue methodology and sources. All I'm saying is we project it the way what's happening in the city. Maybe we're doing that already. Let's hear about that, but that's my thoughts with regards to projecting our financial forecast for the next 10 years, as well as our projection of our expenditures for the next 10 years to even out, right? Wondering that our expenditures for the next 10 years doesn't increment 3%. Why is there a better methodology to represent the incremental expenditures as we go forward on the forecast of 10 years? And we increase it realistically to 4%. Everybody probably knows that 3% is very conservative. Again, I'm not a financial, I just know how to calculate. Each percent regards to an increase that probably a few $100,000 or $1 million as it's projected there. So that's my thought. And I'm glad that we're having this discussion going to schedule that till June. We have several months. But at this early, I would suggest focus on those actually whether they represent really what we project in the next 10 years, or we enhance it other years.
Thank you. Is there?
Sorry, I thought.
It's okay. Good point. I too, when I saw this, I was very concerned because it's all red. Only like 1 or 2 are black. So my general rule is revenue is a forecast. Expenditure is a commitment. We're locked in. So I guess that being said, I agree with you what you said. We need to look at our costs. We need to look at our expenditure. Because we can make enhancement to the revenue, but that's still a forecast. But the expenditure is cast and concrete. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
That's more.
So, at the workshop that we attended in Monterey, they did talk about not putting all your eggs in one basket, to diversify. For example, I know most of our funding comes from property taxes, but however, we need to start thinking, what if there's another recession? Back in 2018, people lost their homes. We need to start doing more economic development. That's really important because we need to start having a balance. But they spoke about that at the last workshop I attended, that Monday that I attended. So yeah, because we need to start thinking about increasing our revenues, sales tax. All right, Ed, can you continue, please?
Mayor, can I add just one comment really quickly? Just very briefly, a couple of thoughts on this conversation, When, for example, when Councilman Barbadillo brought up the conversion of land from say non-residential to residential, there's always a fiscal impact. A lot of times when they're a larger project, we will ask the developer to produce a fiscal impact study to show what that impact will be to the city's bottom line. So I don't know how we would incorporate that into this type of a budget discussion, but I think it's important as we bring those forward to the council that we always have that type of information available to you. And one of the things that we can do is link that to budget impacts. Sometimes we don't take it that far. We just say, well, they did a financial impact, and here's what the bottom line is, but we don't always connect it to the budget. The other thing I would offer is that one of the other revenue sources, of course, are the fees, the permits. And as we put together the plans for the metro area and then for Main Street, and we look forward over the next several years for continued development, redevelopment of those areas, it's not just a fee revenue, but of course the property tax that will increase in those areas. And again, that's a little bit imprecise. And I think one of the reasons we don't put it into the budget is that we expect that will happen, but we don't know it concretely. So I think that's what finance director Lauren was getting at, that we don't want to put a guess number into the budget, but maybe there's a way. We'll look at that to see if there's some way that we could. And the last thing I'll mention is, a few months ago we had a discussion with you about Measure F. Of course, Measure F is front and center, and we're happy that the council gave direction to do some additional surveying, and we hope to have that on the agenda, or excuse me, on the November ballot, so that we could renew that. That will help us as we you will see fewer red numbers on there if we know that Measure F, there may be red numbers, so there'll be much smaller red numbers as long as we have Measure F. Some of the other measures that we talked, one of them in particular was the modernization of our business tax. And that's something that we can still talk about. And that modernization of the business tax would generate additional revenue. So that's just one example of one of the strategies that we could employ to increase on the revenue side. But also to the Vice Mayor's point, that we also need to look at the expenditures too.
Thank you. So there's prioritization of sponsor referrals. So I want to ask, should I ask for public comment now and then? Because we've already finished. No, after the presentation.
Mayor, there's only one time for public comment during a study session like this, and it is before the agenda item.
So no more.
No more.
Budget.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. It's important as we're talking about kicking off this year's budget process as a lead into the fiscal year 24-25 budget, and listen to the revenue and expenditures and the financial forecast, that we also have a reminder discussion about referrals and priorities that have been brought up by the Mayor and City Council in this past fiscal year since the last budget process. So we can have that discussion regarding which of these referrals may be important to focus on for staff as we develop our proposed budget that will be presented to you in the spring. There are 3 items on this slide that have been prioritized by the Mayor and City Council since the last budget was adopted last June. And the citywide senior discount program, charter city evaluation, and international festival on Main Street. The citywide senior discount, which was prioritized as a priority work effort by the Mayor and City Council, even though no funding has been allocated yet, there has been work, and the City Attorney's Office has done a great deal of investigation and potential options. The next step on this would be, if we were to continue, is to do a survey of a segment of the business community, so that we can bring those results back to the Mayor and City Council, along with some potential program options for your consideration. And so the initial staff work has been performed that looks at some potential options that we could proceed with. However, until such time as we allocate funding for a business survey, we don't have a lot more work that we would be able to proceed with. The next item on this is the charter city evaluation. This was prioritized last November by the Mayor and City Council as part of the prioritization, or by the City Council as part of the prioritization session. We have a cost estimate of $40,000 to $70,000 to continue this effort. if it was to proceed. The lower dollar amount would be for a small community survey and some additional staff time. And this larger dollar amount would also include more a community outreach process or a task force process, such as the city did about 20 years ago that the vice mayor was actually involved in at the time. If this does proceed, we would like additional feedback from the mayor and city council regarding any priorities that you would like us to focus on as we look into options for a potential charter city. There are also some items that have not yet been prioritized, but we wanted to bring them up as a reminder today in case funding is needed in the future and in case there's any feedback that you'd like to provide. The affordable housing ordinance, this was raised as a potential prioritization item by Mayor Montano. And this has not been set as a city council priority yet, but at our next prioritization session, which will likely be in either February or March, it may be, and since it's been brought up already, we wanted to raise it this evening as a reminder, and our initial cost estimate for that is about $70,000 for the staff work. There are also 3 items that were brought up at the most recent council meeting: and naming of the library, retail theft best practices workshop, and changes to the commission handbook to promote collaboration. Our initial feedback on these 3 items that they'll probably be less than 4 hours of work. On the naming, and so we probably will likely not bring them in the near future for potential prioritization. The naming of the library, if that turns into something where there is a desire for a new name, there could ultimately be additional cost associated with signage and changing the materials. And so, but the initial stages of that staff work, we could do under 4 hours work. And so we're not asking for any funding at this time. And we likely won't ask for those to be prioritized by council in the near future. These next 2 slides are just a reminder of some items that are currently on the city council prioritization list that have been brought forward by mayor or city council member with consensus and are being worked on right now by staff. Some of them were never voted on as priorities because we indicated that they're under 4 hours of staff work. And some of them were actually voted on as priorities. At this time, we're not asking for any funding for any of these. They're work efforts, some of which may turn into future funding requests. And so we wanted to highlight them on today's presentation in case there's anything specific that any of you wanted to provide us feedback on. Some of these have the letter CIP in parentheses after means that they would probably, if funding was provided, it would likely be from the capital budget, and we can talk about these again at the capital budget study session, which is about 1 month from today. So I explore ordinance or retail residential home solicitors, retail theft, information in the city's gray water rebate program, additional locations for public distribution of Narcan, potential recreation programs for bingo and senior trips, standalone teen center, small business workshop, the vacant lot at Pasona, and for a possible recreation facility, flooding at the Main Street area, explore opportunities for retail theft in parking lots, and evaluation of childcare at the Milpitas Community Center. This, as mentioned by City Manager Thomas at the beginning of this presentation, we also have a few slides from Recreation Community Services Director Renee Lorenzen regarding events, citywide special events, as we know that is a topic of that we want to address as part of this budget process, especially with the ARPA funded events. The funding for the ARPA funded events going away after this calendar year. And with that, I'll turn it over to Renee.
Great. I have one question.
Yes.
The list of priorities. Sorry. The priority list, I remember I asked to place the request of $10,000 to fund ham radios for public safety and emergency preparedness committee. And I don't see it on here.
Councilmember, let me follow back up on that request. Let me check on the statuses. I can't recall the specifics of where that's at right now, but I'll look to see if I can find that.
place that request?
Yes, I'm trying to, I'll look to see what the specific status of that is and make sure that it's added to this. And it can be part of the CIP discussion as well, because if we do fund the radios, it would be part of the capital. And so I'll make sure that it's included in that discussion in a month as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Renee?
And thank you for that question, and Matt and Councilmember Leon, we added that ham radio into this, a grant that we wrote for, resilient centers as well. So when Matt comes back, that'll be part of that, could be part of that discussion. So good evening, Mayor and City Council members. Renee Lorenzen, Director of Community Services. I'm going to go over just a few slides about strategies for moving forward with city special events. This has been a topic of question in the last couple of months with the ending of the ARPA monies for cultural events. So just an overview, the department hosts, and we will be hosting 47 special events and flag raisings this fiscal year, which ends July of 2024. That includes 23 citywide events, 6 ARPA events, a one-time funded budgeted event, which was retro, Milpitas, 1 park dedication and grand opening, supporting 10 cultural flag raisings, and then 6 city commission events this year. Next slide, please. So as we all know, we had 6 ARPA events. The ARPA funding is finishing in December of this year. And so as we work to prepare a balanced budget for our special event program for 24-25, noting that those programs won't have funding after this fiscal year, we wanted to put together an event program that celebrates the traditions and the cultures of our Milpitas residents. We want to support the community's positive response to and the great participation, the ARPA funded cultural events and the dedication ceremonies. And so staff is drafting an event calendar that realigns all of the events to the existing staffing levels and the capacities, and then incorporating those popular ARPA cultural events into the regular event calendar. We feel that this strategy will help to focus and provide a more diverse program with higher impact community events. So part of this event calendar, this is just what it could look like. This is not a final of any kind at all. And I want to point out that we're talking just about the city events, the flag raisings and the commission events. Those continue as proposed and included in resolutions particular to the flag raisings. So in the summer, we would have our regular series. You'll see in bold the ARPA events that we would incorporate into our regular event schedule, which includes Lantern, the dedication events at Stellano Menongs, Milpitas Fiesta. We would incorporate that into the regular event calendar, Dia de los Muertos, and then the Holy Festival in spring. So there's about 8 or so events each season that we would produce for the community. A high number of those are cultural and some are traditional, like our summer concerts, 4th of July, which is our largest events, tree lighting, and our Veterans and Memorial Day ceremonies. Next slide. So this really is a feedback session that staff is looking for from the council, just on the overall philosophy of realigning the events, reducing some, and incorporating and bringing in the ARPA events from this year that celebrated culture, what that would look like on that draft calendar for next year. And then as part of that discussion, we do have the City Council's priority for the Main Street international event. And so as part of that feedback, we're looking for information on it's the priority for that event. The location, is it important that it's an event on Main Street, or is there really a focus on the importance of it being international, but it does not need to be on Main Street? And then some considerations is depending on the size and the scope of that new event, where it falls in the timeline, it may well require the replacement of an existing major event so that we can adequately plan a calendar for the community. And then depending on the timing of the event in the month, it may conflict with established cultural holidays and celebrations if we do have an international theme. So those are just things that we need to be mindful of as we add a new event to the calendar. And so with that, we are.
Thank you. We just have a few more slides. This is a quick summary of the American Rescue Plan Act funding. So as you're aware, the federal government provided funding to cities in response to COVID-19 for American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funding. We received $16.7 million in 2021. As of the end of December 2023, we had expended 8.3, roughly half, or a little over half, about half of that money. We do have two large encumbrances that are incurred in this quarter. One is for the human resources and fiscal ERP, HRIS, the human resources and financial system that was awarded by the mayor and city council in December. And then another large encumbrance that is pending soon is the phase 2 of the ARPA funded parks projects, which the bids are actually due from the contractors in a few weeks, and we should be in front of the mayor and city council with the recommended award of that project in March. And then we hope to start construction in April or May. The deadline to encumber, so get fund, for the most part, with some exceptions, the deadline to encumber or place all these funds under contract is the end of 2024, the end of this year. We are partnering with a consulting firm, AG Witt, to research the evolving treasury regulations to ensure that we do comply with that. That deadline, evolving, it is challenging to get guidelines from the federal government. However, we are working, again, like I said, closely with our consultant and other partners to make sure that we receive those guidelines and that we encumber all the money by the deadline. There are likely going to be some projects that we have completed. There are savings that will be coming to the mayor and city council and talking about where to making some recommendations and also receiving then your feedback and directions on where to reallocate that funding. We'll have an informational memo out probably by the end of next week with the status of a number of these or all the ARPA funding categories to provide you some background information on where we're at. And then later in February or very early in March, we would return to the mayor and city council with a more detailed discussion and some recommendations and receive that direction on some potential reallocations to ensure that we spend all the money for our community by the end of 2024 deadline. So with that, that concludes the slides in our presentation. Really, we've received a lot of feedback already and really appreciate that. In addition, any specific feedback you have on any council priorities, especially related to the senior discount and Charter City or Main Street Festival, which have been already prioritized but would need additional funding to continue, or any other feedback that you have on anything, but especially related to desired service levels that you'd like to see us move forward with as we prepare the proposed budget to present to you in the spring.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Few weeks ago, I wrote an email to Ned and Matt about budget consideration items. And I have, personnel and I think consultants, ARPA, events, and ERP budgeted versus expenditure. So you answered the ARPA and the events, and I will look forward to for you, the executive team, addressing the personnel. Like I explained in the email, is what is the projected FTEs, how many vacancies do we have, and if we did not use the funds for those vacancies, what did we do with the funds? And I'm looking forward to those. And the other one, I wrote an email about other events that it's about going electric. If you remember, it's a long email. It's a request to update a page, our website to, it's just like the ADU ADU corner, it will be Going Electric corner, where you can have a Going Electric Tuesday. They can call and make appointment because we are anticipating this $3 million+ from Congressman Rokana and another donation or grant from Silicon Valley Clean Energy. So if we can prep that, because according to Deputy Director Elaine Marshall, we're fairly close on getting the grant from the Department of Energy. So she did all the paperwork. I would like to see that Going Electric corner with Going Electric Tuesday and Going Electric incentives that we're going to get. We want to help. We're projecting about 1,000 households will benefit from these grants, or like 20 to 25,000 grants per household. So, and also I would like to add on the events, we hear about Assembly Members Local Heroes Award. You know, Congressman Rokana has a local hero. So we'd like to add a Milpitas Community Heroes Award. And what I mean by that, each council member can nominate an individual, an organization, a club, whatever. It's up to us. Each one of us can grant that award. And I was thinking we can incorporate that with the commissioner's recognition, so it will be there. And I would like it's a yearly thing that we select our own. You know, there's no question. Whoever you select or whichever organization you select, that's it. It's up to each council member. I've seen that done with other cities and I like it. So I think that's all I have.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Anyone else? Councilmember Barbadio?
I can't let you go. Can you please, just for the purpose of looking at possibilities, that actual 3% we had with salary, if we substitute that with, or we add another 3% of that, can at least see some projection, we use 6%.
I think the request is if we could up the model with a 6% assumption versus 3% assumption for cost of living, that's the request.
For the caller.
I can see what the estimate is, but I do want to confirm that it's not based on an actuarial study. The pension is an actuarial study,
Right.
but the cost of living is a matter of just current methodology.
Also, the 3%, just current methodology.
Correct. So I just want to make sure all of us in the room understand the reason why we use an actuarial study for the purpose of pension is because we have an unfunded liability. That unfunded liability has an assumed vested right, cost, growth assumption for the investment portfolio. And so that's why we use an actuarial assumption. I just wanted to make sure members of the public didn't feel like we were being a bit too simplistic with cost of living, but
Right.
that's the
I
distinction.
misunderstood it. I thought the presentation is based on actuarial. Now it's clear that it's based on methodology.
Correct.
So if we could at least, just for comparison, and then let's see if it evens out prior to June, as we go forward with expected cost, we put 6%.
In a long-term scenario,
Well, I think that's the going rate, but yes, if we could.
I sure hope it's not. But I
think
hear what
it's,
you're saying, which is, you'd like to kind of understand what implications there could be.
Right, if it's 6%, contrast to what we use is 3%, now that I know it's based on methodology, yes.
High level, the deficit will be exacerbated and larger than what's been presented tonight.
Okay, well, if you. That's my 3% more. But let's see. So it's just something that we can look at. And as I said, as we go forward with more realistic expenditures, especially COLA, then we can see the difference between 3% methodology, my 6% and then actual later on. So when we meet again, ensure that actual will be some realization to be the exact percentage. Thank you.
Councilmember Nan?
Yes, Mayor, I just want to ask, Vice Mayor Chua, to clarify when you said the recognition to heroes,
Milpitas, community heroes.
okay, and you said any one of us can nominate or
No.
put in a name?
No, we honor grant each one of us.
And no question
There's no
asked.
override. You know, it's like.
And you said no
whoever.
questions asked, right?
Exactly. It's your choice.
But don't we have to pick the one that's doing something for the city? Because when you say no questions asked, I can basically just nominate anybody,
It's
right?
up to you. It's your
And
choice.
if that certificate or that commendation meant something, if it is special and we can just pick anyone, then it's not special anymore.
So,
It's special.
sorry to interrupt, council members. I think this would require a council policy. And so I think the way for us to move forward with this would be to have staff develop a council policy
Yeah, but
that would include criteria, potential criteria that a council member might use to appoint their person. And then the council could comment on the more specific model policy that the staff can bring and tell us exactly what you want at that time.
Because when I heard the word, no questions asked, I was like.
What I'm saying,
okay.
it's not, you can give the award without nominating. I'm saying there's no, but the guidelines is the best way to do it. Yeah, the
Yes, we
guidelines.
have to have
That's
a
what I meant.
policy and criteria of how to give our.
You might not have any more than 1 year. Because
That's
I
right.
think the reason why I am suggesting it is because I'm exposed to different organizations as well as anybody else here. And not all of us have the same sphere of influence, if you will. So I think it gives us the freedom. Okay, so, it gives. Okay, so the guidelines, I think is good. Thank you. It's a start.
That's a good
It's a
start,
start.
because
Yeah.
I haven't heard any feedback, so I'm kind of worried, because if I'm going to be one of the hero and
If you're
you
not-
guys don't know what I did.
No.
So for me, that piece of paper means nothing. And I would hate to get that.
No, it's
Yes.
organization, it's individual or groups or organization you are going to give an award to, something to that.
I know, I'm just giving you an example.
Okay,
Mayor.
okay, thank you.
Mayor, if I may. So a very good discussion. I didn't want to interrupt, but, and other council members may have additional items to add, but so far, I just wanted to say that we have the two, that were proposed by, Vice Mayor Chua on the Going Electric Corner and the Local Heroes Awards. Both of those are kind of problematic. So for staff to move forward when we get through with them, to have some type of a consensus by the council on that, when we get through everything. The other item on the personnel is just an information request, and we'll get that to you. Did you have some? No. Okay. So when we get through everyone, then if we could, allow it to get for a consensus.
Okay, is there anyone else?
No referrals. If you're going to, I have to close, I move it close. I do want to thank Director Lai for the presentation. I think it is very, very detailed, and thank you for being so conservative, because if you are going to project, this is a forecast. And if we are going to put the number as close as to the reality or the number that is gonna turn out as, what is it called? No,
Yeah.
something like that.
The real thing.
Yes. Yes, and if you don't put, you know, these red deficit numbers, any one of us see there's a profit or, good numbers to spend, we're gonna go crazy, giving you all kinds of line items to fill in to make sure that we're going to spend all the money. Is that right, Councilmember Bobadilla?
Well, yeah, if I don't see a recognize. But I think, my thought is if we put. Oh, okay, I'll do that. If we put, as you said, a more realistic number, we will see more reds and, we will confront those reds with a more realistic, approach. Right. So, as I said, I keep on repeating myself, we do have a methodology of 3%. And, I expect that has overshoot already, based on current circumstances of the city. And so, let's anticipate that and, put a more realistic figure than, at least on my thoughts, a more realistic figure than, the methodology of 3%, to a closer one on what we expect, to happen. And in doing so, then, whether we see more reds or, we see, positive numbers, is that's the basis on, the policy decision making, the city council. That's right.
Thank you, Councilmember Papadiol. I would. Councilmember Ben?
Can we sell the Minuteman statue? I think it's dated. No, bronze, you know, just for the raw material, or even just donate it to, the Historical Society. Replace it with, you know, the trademark for, Mickey Mouse expired. It's not even a gun thing, you know, we put Mickey Mouse up there with holding the gun up for all I care. But yeah, no, like it's just there. You know, that's just my yeah, or yeah, relocation of it, or you know, somewhere where it's not yeah, because I don't think, maybe it represented something different back then, but nowadays, if that's the first thing that you see at City Hall, you know, it's not really something that I think is attractive. I think it's ugly, to be completely candid.
And can that request be referred to the Arts Commission for further study?
We're going to ask the consent for the moment, we can include that in the list.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's a good idea. Yeah. Yeah, as well. I like that idea from Councilmember Ben.
Thank you. So I did see a list up there ahead, that this. You had this childcare center.
Yes.
Now, is that time to discuss that if I wanted to bring that back up?
Absolutely, and it's on the list as it is something that is being worked on, that analysis is being worked on. And if, depending on that analysis and pending on our future recommendations, if we wanted to convert, say, a room at one of our buildings to a childcare center, there would be a future capital cost to that. We don't have any estimates of that capital cost right now because we are basically further analysis is necessary. And so that is currently on our work plan of things to analyze.
Okay, great, yeah, because I do feel that there is a need, and also it's an income generator or a revenue generator. So. I'm in favor. Again, you said no.
Okay.
I want to thank all, thank you for that hard work that you did, and all the other staff members for all your hard work. Thank you so much. If there's nothing else.
Mayor, sorry to interrupt, there's 6 areas, and this is obviously, tonight is not the final vote on the budget, but there's 6 areas that were brought up tonight, either by staff or in this discussion by city council, that we'd like to see if there could be consensus on each of these areas, so that we can, and if there's consensus, obviously, then we would take that into account when we're developing, take that consensus into account as we're moving forward. So if it works for you, I can read those 6 areas. Well, I'll list them all right now real quickly, and then we can come back and do a consensus on them. So providing additional funding for the senior discount, charter city evaluation, Main Street Festival, Go Electric Corner, Community Heroes policy, and referring the Minuteman issue to the Arts Commission. Those are the 6 areas. There was also some informational requests we received tonight, but we're not going to ask you for consensus on the informational requests. Those are just things we'll be following up on as part of this process. So if that works, the first one, the senior discount, and I just want to indicate, if there's a yes consensus, that doesn't necessarily mean the entire 500,000-600,000. That would just mean we would consider taking that next step in the budget process. So the senior discount, first one. Oh, you're gonna do this, Susan? Thank you.
Councilmember Bardillo?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Chua? Aye. Councilmember Liang?
No.
Councilmember Fan?
Aye.
Mayor Montano?
But with the condition that you're looking to our
Oh, AARP.
Yeah, AARP, because I think they have the resources, some resources to provide our seniors.
Okay, thank you. The next one is funding for the next phase of a charter, or the first phase really of a charter city evaluation.
Councilmember Barbadillo?
No.
Vice Mayor Chua?
Aye, for discussion.
Councilmember Liang?
Aye.
Councilmember Fan?
Aye.
Mayor Montano?
That item came up at our workshop in Monterey, and the original intent, original concept of charter city has been changed with the legislature. So I'm going to say no.
The next item is the Go Electric Corner.
Isn't this the Main Street Festival now?
Oh, I'd like to do that one last because that may have some more back and forth with our recreation director.
All right. To Go Electric, Councilmember Barbadillo?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Chua?
Aye.
Councilmember Liang?
Aye.
Councilmember Fan?
Aye.
Mayor Montano?
Aye.
Next one is the Community Heroes policy.
Councilmember Barbadillo?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Chua?
Aye.
Councilmember Liang?
Aye.
Councilmember Fan?
Aye.
Mayor Montano?
Aye.
Thank you. And the next one is referring the potential sale or other disposition of Minuteman statue to the Arts Commission.
Councilmember Barbadillo?
I'll agree to talk about it. Yes.
Vice Mayor Chua?
Aye.
Councilmember Liang?
Aye.
Councilmember Fan?
Aye.
Mayor Montano?
And the next one is the Main Street Festival, and so I'll just ask for your consensus, and then if the consensus is a yes, I know that there would be the Recreation Director Lorenzen would need to provide some feedback and talk about how that could possibly impact some other major events. But first, I will ask for that consensus vote.
Councilmember Barbadillo?
Say that again, it's the Main Street Festival?
Sure, the International Main Street Festival has been prioritized by this mayor and city council. However, if we do proceed with a multi-day festival on Main Street, it would have an impact on our staffing resources and event calendar. And I'll actually see if Renee, you want to add any more information on that before we take that consensus vote?
Yes, so it would be a Main Street Festival that's of international focus right now. So the discussion, if there's consensus on doing that, would be, is the focus actually that we need a Main Street event or that we need another international event? And answers to those questions will determine potential cost and what other events they need to fall off to accommodate a new event.
So this is in addition to existing?
Correct, so this would be, yes, we have several cultural flag raisings and cultural events. So that's why the question is, does the council want to continue to prioritize this? And if so, is the focus the international component, or is it that they would like another event on Main Street?
And you said it could displace existing events to
If we added,
It may-
if we added a large multi-day event to the calendar, then another event would need to come off due to staffing and workload.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Renee, but we would not ask you to choose between events this evening. We would have to return.
Correct,
Discuss it.
right, correct,
To
right.
the city council at a future date.
please no.
Vice Mayor Chua.
Can we make this clear? I thought we were going to discuss all events and then the council will decide which event based on the recommendation from Parks and Recs, what events we will, the scope of the event, because when I think of international event celebration, I was just thinking of one day. I wasn't thinking of multi days. You see what I'm saying? And so
Yes.
is it the best way to, what is the purpose of the question tonight?
I think that the request for this prioritization included a 2-day international festival on Main Street. So we just need to understand if there's consensus with that priority. And then following that, just a couple items of clarification on the focus of the event, so that we come back to the council in spring with the event calendar. We placed it in a good month and time frame. And then we have information from the council about what, if anything, would need to come off the calendar to accommodate a new event. So you would see the list of events, not tonight, but you would see it later in the process to have that deeper discussion.
So we will see all the events and we will decide which events will go and whatever.
We would, yeah, we would-
What's the real Milpitas events
Right,
for
we
the
would-
year?
Correct, Vice Mayor. We will present a calendar, a full calendar. And then if a Main Street International Festival is still a priority, would show what that calendar would look like with
Yeah.
it.
With the budget.
Within
and
it,
all
yes,
that,
correct,
staff
and what the actual
requirements.
budget would be, but we just need a little bit more information to bring a good discussion item back to you all.
I would say yes, but with one day, not a multi-day event.
Councilmember Liam.
Yes.
Councilmember Fan.
Aye.
Mayor Montano.
I'm going to say no because we already have several ethnic events. Have the Dia de los Muertos, we have the Lunar, we have the Old Holly, the Indian Festival. We have several already. I'm just thinking about the workload for the staff. That's the reason I'm going to say no.
And Mayor,
How about Vice Mayor?
And we can decide on that when the full calendar is presented to us with the full copy.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, any announcement? Is that it?
Announcement?
Any announcements, Vice Mayor?
I saw an email this morning from city manager. And when I read it, even though I wasn't feeling well, I was like so happy when I saw it. And guess what it was? It's the DB Biosciences. I was just floored when I saw that. And it's gonna bring in at least approximately 75 million excluding fees to Milpitas, 800 new jobs to us. And I just wanna really thank these people, and please bear with me. I want to say their names. So I wanna thank City Manager Ed Thomas and Matt Kano, Deputy City Manager, Economic Development Alex Andrade, Planning Department Michael Posadi, Avery Stark, William Benoit, Building and Safety Patty Chan, Linda Hodges, Isaac Howe, Jacqueline MBC, Gary King, Vice Shali Prasad, Lauren Preston, Sagamitra Reddy, Benon Sanders, and Bill Top. And also fire prevention, Arthur Belton, Martin Gatdula, Jaime Hernandez, Nehemia O'Neill, Nicholas Tran, and from the land development, Roberto Alonso, Tyler Wen, Glenn Wong, Jeremy Wu, Public Works, Alan Ha. Thank you so much. It's such a cool. If you can please just say a few words about how you were able to get this highly coveted. There were a lot of competition from Santa Clara, from San Jose, and lo and behold, we got it. And thank you so much.
Good evening. Alex Andrade, Director of Economic Development. Thank you, Vice Mayor, for bringing up the BD Biosciences business attraction effort. One of the reasons for that information memorandum is to showcase that success is a team effort. And that's exactly what you ended up getting. The names and the representatives from those various departments and divisions came together, gosh, really years ago for this effort. And let me catch my breath here. It really was a tremendous body of work by various departments and divisions. And it started really in 2019 when the city council, we took to the city council between economic development and planning what was or is known as the partial assignment and assumption agreement. And that action allowed for 75 acres to be split in 35 acres. So 35 of those acres is owned by Bridge Development. And that's currently where Amazon currently has 300,000 square feet. And the other 35,000 is exactly, or rather the other 35 acres is owned by Embarcadero Partners. And that's where Corsair Gaming is currently located. They're in one of the buildings. And then BD Biosciences is taking 240,000 square feet and will be bringing in 800 employees in a 9-month process. So a little less than 60 employees have already started operating from there. So yeah, it really is a competition in terms of the site selection process. And we were competing against other locations in San Jose and Santa Clara, and the business, BD Biosciences, which is the largest bioscience business in the world with 75,000 employees. They selected Milpitas for a lot of great reasons. The site has great amenities and it's a beautiful building. Actually, we're gonna occupy 2 buildings, but yeah, they recognize that this is a premier location. They initially asked for staff to prioritize the permit process. We worked with the city, not only the city council, but we worked with the city manager's office and all the departments that are listed in that information memorandum. And it truly is a success story. We hope to have a grand opening celebration in the spring.
I just want to add that 60+ employees started working last month. And the rest of the staff will trickle in the rest of 2024. The 800 will be there by the end of 2024. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I have two quick announcements.
Okay.
Sorry.
City Manager.
So just want to thank everyone for coming last Thursday to the 70th anniversary open house at City Hall. So that we will continue to have events throughout the rest of the year. And I also wanted to let you know that today is our Assistant City Manager's first anniversary with the city. So he's been here 1 year and we want to acknowledge him as well.
That meeting adjourned.